Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the Campus Stress Reduction Project. Today's webinar will cover identifying and setting boundaries. My name is Nadalyn Reyes. I'm an MSW intern at Fresno City College.
Hello, my name is Enrique Mercado, and I'm an MSW intern at Fresno City College as well.
And we would like to thank you all for joining us today. So we would like to begin today's webinar with a quick poll to explore your understanding of how you currently feel about boundaries. So if you could please fill out the poll and we'll give you some time to answer that poll. Okay, so it seems like most of the results are strongly agree and agree. So I think that's great that you are able to understand boundaries. For those of you that said disagree, I hope that through this webinar, you are able to understand and identify boundaries a little bit better. So we want to thank you all for participating in our poll. And I would like to move on to our objectives for this webinar. So our objectives for this webinar are for you to be able to understand boundaries, identify boundaries, how boundaries relate to stress, and how to set healthier boundaries to manage your stress. In order to identify and set boundaries, we should understand its definition and complexity. So for this webinar's purpose, we will be focusing on personal and professional boundaries. So we can define it using its literal definition that boundaries are something that indicates or fixes a limit or extent. And we can define personal boundaries as a limit or space between you and the other person. They are norms, rules, or codes of conduct that characterizes an individual's space and environment and his or her sense of security and safety. So when we are able to achieve healthy boundaries, they are able to provide a nurturing and safe physical, emotional, sexual, and spiritual environment. And learning when to say no and when to say yes is part of feeling comfortable with when interacting with others. So it's important to remember that boundaries are essential at all ages, and that the expectations for boundaries and setting boundaries in cultures may be different. Because Fresno City College is also a place of employment in addition to its education, it's important to also understand professional boundaries. So we can define professional boundaries as a set of guidelines, expectations, and rules which set the ethical and technical standards in the work environment. And professional boundaries set limits for safe, acceptable, and effective behaviors for work. So some boundary issues at work could look like doing work for others, being asked about personal issues, working without pay, working during downtime, not taking needed time off, and saying yes to tasks you can't responsibly complete. So if any of those feel familiar to you, you may need to evaluate your current boundaries and begin to set healthier work boundaries. And we'll cover doing so in this webinar. So there are 6 types of boundaries, which include physical, sexual, intellectual, emotional, material, and time. And these 6 types of boundaries are able to be applied to different environments and relationships, such as your family, your work, your friends, and your romantic relationships. So I would like to go over the examples of the violations of these 6 types of boundaries. So examples of physical boundary violations. So those include physical abuse, forcing hugs, forcing kisses or handshakes, or standing too close. Examples of sexual boundary violations include sexual abuse or assault, comments about people's sexual appearance, and sexual jokes. And examples of intellectual boundary violations include calling someone names for their beliefs or opinions, and dismissing someone because of disagreements. Examples of emotional boundary violations include emotional dumping or excessive venting. You invalidate someone's feelings, or you minimize the impact of something or someone's feelings. And examples of material boundary violations include never returning a borrowed item back, or you damage a possession and you refuse to pay for it. And examples of time boundary violations. So that could be asking someone to stay late at work with no additional pay, or you're trying to reach someone off hours and you're expecting them to reply, or overcommitting to tasks. So personal space and physical touch are your physical boundaries. We all have a certain level of awareness of our bodies and what is and isn't comfortable. So using physical boundaries as an example, there may be questions about setting physical boundaries on campus, especially when students return on campus, students, faculty, and staff. They may be excited to give each other handshakes or hugs, and some of you will be okay with that. Others will want to maintain social distancing, and that applies to the students too. They may be okay with that. Others may want to maintain social distancing. So boundaries need to be verbally said and understood. So if you're giving boundaries, if you're receiving boundaries, it's important to understand and respect those boundaries. And it may be awkward at first, especially in the beginning. Students may be violating that space for you. So it's important to be prepared to set those boundaries before returning to that environment for the upcoming spring semester or whenever students come back on campus. So setting a physical boundary may sound like, please move back a little, or you may say, I'm more of a handshaker, I don't want to hug. Emotional boundaries is sharing and expressing your feelings appropriately and in a healthy manner. So when you do share and people invalidate your feelings or it makes you uncomfortable and you may not want to share next time, it violates emotional boundaries. So violating emotional boundaries in your classrooms may be pushing a student to share information they're not comfortable sharing with, and setting a emotional boundary may sound like, it's okay for me to feel how I feel in any situation. Or you may say, I don't feel comfortable talking about that topic. And going to intellectual boundaries. So those refer to your thoughts and your ideas. You're free to have an opinion and shouldn't be dismissed or ridiculed for having them. However, you want to stay mindful on appropriate versus inappropriate topics and specific situations and environments as a way of respecting others' boundaries. So violating intellectual boundaries may be common on campus, especially in the classrooms with your students. You may be leading a heavy topic discussion and there may be students being dismissive or belittling others because of their beliefs or opinions. So it's important to be aware of when intellectual boundaries are being violated in your classrooms. Setting an intellectual boundary may sound like, you can disagree without being mean or rude, or you may say, I won't talk to you if you keep raising your voice. Or another one could be, I just said something and you dismissed me, why? And time boundaries consist of how you manage your time. So how you allow others to use your time and how you manage your free time. And structuring a healthy work-life balance is difficult for most people, and it does take time and practice. So setting a time boundary may sound like, I'm unable to stay late today. Or you may say, I work from 9 to 5 o'clock, so I am not able to chat during that time. So time boundaries in the classroom definitely let students know when you are available, when they can reach you, and just make sure they know your time boundaries. Now, going back to physical boundaries, I would like to do a short reflection engagement activity, and I will read a statement. It's just for you to reflect on. So it says, your coworker enters your cubicle while you're busy completing a task. When you don't respond, your coworker persists by leaning over you at your desk. So just take some time to reflect, consider what you would do or you would say to set a physical boundary. Okay, so while there are 6 types of boundaries, there are also levels of boundaries as well. So there are porous, rigid, and healthy boundaries. So beginning with porous, those are weak, poorly expressed. Porous boundaries lead to feeling depleted and lead to unhealthy relationships. Porous boundaries may look like codependency, the inability to say no, and people pleasing. Rigid boundaries, they build walls to keep others out, and they are a self-protective mechanism. They're meant to build some distance. Rigid boundaries look like having high expectations of others. You avoid vulnerability, you're cutting people off, and you enforce strict rules. Lastly, healthy boundaries, those are when you're aware of your emotional, your mental, and your physical capabilities combined with clear communication. Healthy boundaries, they look like being clear about your values, you share with others appropriately, you have healthy vulnerability, and you're comfortable saying no. So it is common for individuals to have a mixture of different boundary levels. For example, you may have rigid boundaries at work, porous in your romantic relationships, and then healthy in your family relationships. Now, again, just like the last slide, I would like to give some time just for reflection of what we talked about, the definition, the 6 types of boundaries, the levels of boundaries, what you've been familiar or unfamiliar with. And if you can identify if you do have a mixture of levels of boundaries in your own lives. Okay, so when you are starting to feel overwhelmed, or you already feel overwhelmed, or you are stressed out, you feel resentment toward people asking you for help, you're burnt out, you're avoiding phone calls, whether this be phone calls from your family, your friends, or colleagues. So you avoid phone calls or conversations with people that might ask you for something. You're beginning to daydream and just wanting to drop everything and disappear. You have no time for yourself. You're feeling frustrated, or you're beginning to cancel or flake on plans. That may be a sign that you are overbooked. And all of these may be signs that you may need healthier boundaries in order to manage your stress. So learning to be assertive about your limitations will help alleviate these symptoms. So feeling stressed, burnt out, and remember that it's okay to limit your availability, to say no, and to prioritize your needs because your needs matter. So boundaries do have a link to stress. So findings from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, they found that long work hours may impair personal health, jeopardize your safety, and increase stress. And in the US, it was found that full-time workers devote 60% of their day on average to personal care. So that's your eating and sleeping, and leisure. That's being able to do your hobbies, take a walk, spend time with family and friends. So that 60% was less than the OECD average of 15 hours. And the US actually ranked 30th out of 40 countries in terms of time devoted to leisure and personal care. So a lack of healthy boundaries can lead to increased stress and burnout. Workplace-related stress and heavy workload are key drivers of burnout. And burnout is when people are emotionally, physically, and mentally exhausted. And burnout is caused by not knowing how to say no, prioritizing others over yourself, people pleasing, superhero syndrome, which is the I can do it all syndrome, and just not being appreciated for what you do. So if you are maxed out either at home or at work or both, you might begin to feel detached or drained. And there are physical and psychological consequences of feeling stressed and burnt out. So some physical include high blood pressure, a weakened immune system, difficulty sleeping, headaches, and fatigue. And some psychological consequences include chronic frustration, moodiness, anxiety, depression, irritability, and a lack of motivation or focus. You may notice that your behavior may change as well, such as abusing alcohol and drugs, you're overeating, you're undereating, and you're withdrawing from social interactions. With the drastic changes we've all had to experience and endure during this pandemic, it really is understandable that you may be stressed out from work on top of being able to balance your life outside of work with your family and your friends. You may feel that your boundaries are being pushed like never before. So you will need to consider that you may be able to manage your stress and your workload by setting healthier boundaries, whether setting those boundaries be at work or at home or both. So by establishing healthy boundaries, it does have its benefits, such as you're exercising your personal freedom, you're increasing your emotional health, your relationships are clearly defined, you protect yourself from others, you avoid burnout and stress. It's a self-care practice. And just remember, a self-care is more than just a spa day, it's learning to say no, and it's paying attention to your needs. And it's also a way to feel safe and secured. So by establishing healthy boundaries, you are able to honor your needs and you're able to be present in areas that matter. Now I'd like to turn it over to Enrique, who will cover how to set those healthy boundaries.
Hello. Before I continue with the presentation, I would like to create a quick poll. The question is, the boundaries I set are effective to reduce my stress. So if you can just take a few minutes and respond. Okay, so we have a lot of people answering they strongly agree or they agree that the boundaries they set are effective to reduce their stress. So hopefully through the end of my presentation, I can give you a few extra tips on how to do this, and let's see how this goes. Next slide, please. Thank you. Setting boundaries. One might ask, how do we set boundaries? We start setting boundaries when we start saying no. Imagine a moral compass. At the top, you have your yeses, and at the bottom, you have your nos. Everyone is in the middle of their own life story, and your story is being shaped by what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. Your yeses and your nos are what boundaries are made up of. Setting boundaries can be very stressful, but it's only temporary and it's brief, and you feel better afterwards. It's also very important to set boundaries in relationships. For example, family and friends. This could sometimes be challenging because we don't want to come off as being mean or sounding selfish. But what is important to understand is this is not an act of selfishness to put yourself and your boundaries before somebody else. This is an act of self-love and honesty. Next slide, please. Thank you. Strengthening your boundaries. How do we do this? Well, first, we need to hold people accountable. If someone is doing something to violate your boundaries, let it be known and address it. For example, hey, do you remember how we talked about not being on your phone while having lunch? And don't apologize for setting your boundaries. We are taught at an early age that setting boundaries might be an inconvenience to others, but this idea is false. Also understand how much flexibility to allow. And what I mean by this is to not to allow too much flexibility to where it becomes an issue. Verbalize your boundaries. We sometimes make the mistake that people should already know what our boundaries are. This is why it's very important to have a conversation and clearly state what your boundaries are to avoid this confusion. And if you feel like you have to restate your boundaries more than once, then do so. Next slide, please. Setting boundaries at work. To do this, we first need to identify areas where boundaries are needed. You can uncover this by tuning into your feelings. And one great way to do this is to find a quiet place. And this can be either inside somewhere in your home, office, or outside. But I want you to find a place where you can calmly relax and take a few deep breathers. Once you're relaxed, I want you to ask yourself, what about your job lead you to feel overwhelmed or burnt out? And if at all possible, can you do your work only at work during those hours? Next, give yourself permission to have boundaries at work. Just because you're at work does not mean you can't set limits for yourself. Remember, you're not a robot. Holding back about what you need will create resentment towards your coworkers and employers. For example, boundaries at work sound something like, I will not be able to take any additional projects right now, or I'm sorry, I can't stay late tonight. Also, don't let an issue go too far before you decide to set boundaries. Start setting them on the onside of the possible issue. Teach others how to respect your boundaries by being consistent and by respecting them yourself. Unfortunately, we get caught up with trying to sustain this title of being a good worker, or trying to work so hard by taking on the various tasks that we try to get that promotion because that means success. And with success comes more better wages. And sometimes it's hard for us to set those boundaries even with their families, because our excuse for not spending enough time with them is I'm at work, so I can support us with having a better living. Sometimes when we ask our families what they really want, it's us. It's not all this stuff that we try to support them with. And so then we ask ourselves, or an important question someone might ask is, if I am so successful, why do I feel so miserable? Next slide, please. Thank you. Setting boundaries over Zoom. To do this, we need to verbally set boundaries. We must be clear and state your boundaries. And if you have to, it's okay to remind people. Also, if you're not able to use video Zoom, seek alternative options. Maybe explore calling in and seeing if that's okay. Also, acknowledge block off times. If you find yourself spending too much time using Zoom, this is a call for boundaries. And setting boundaries and block off times, why is this important? With Zoom being the new way of interaction, it's important to limit the time spent in front of computer screens. And one might ask, well, why? We've already reduced our daily commute and the strenuous activities that we would usually do. So why do we feel so tired still? Well, we fail to realize that our brains process images. And when we oversaturate our eyes and brain with the images on the screen, well, these images cause our brain fatigue, and this leads to physical fatigue. This is all the more way it's important for for us to establish block off times. And again, what I mean by block off times, I don't mean just taking a quick 5 minutes and turning your screen to a shopping site or some other site that you feel like is fulfilling for yourself. What I mean by a block off time is really trying to schedule into your work time or your school time, and whether that be an hour or every hour and a half, take a good 10 minutes from away from the screen and find a place just to relax. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we come to the video. This video is about setting boundaries and how to reduce stress. So let's start on this video.
In this video, I want to introduce you to a simple strategy to reduce the stress when working from home. Did you know that 41% of mobile employees reported that they're highly stressed? That might also explain the result of the poll that I ran on the community tab of this channel. So why is it so difficult Or why might it be so stressful working from home? And why might you not be as productive there? One problem is that the lines between what is going on at home and what is going on at work, those lines are blurred. So it's very easy to get caught up in work and to keep working and working and working day after day. You might overeat, you might not get enough sleep, and your relationships with your loved ones or with the people that you live with may also get strained. So here's the strategy, a simple strategy that might help you to reduce the stress that you may feel when working from home. And it's called setting boundaries. When you set boundaries, you get a structure so you can relax and focus on what matters most. You're able to protect the time of the things that you do outside of work and that matter to you. So you will gain more balance in your life. And it will also challenge you to be more creative, so you come up with more novel solutions, and it will increase your effectiveness dramatically. So here are a couple of ways to set boundaries. One is setting physical boundaries. So when you work from home, find a dedicated space. Maybe it may be a room, it may be an area in a room, it may be a table, it may be a chair where you can work, and this will help you to reduce distractions and to help you to keep focused on the things that you need to do. Another way that I recently heard of how to set physical boundaries is to have a dedicated device that you use for work only. Another way to set boundaries are time-related boundaries. Have a hard start and a hard end time for your workday, and try to work only 40 hours. It's very easy to work 60 hours or 80 hours when you work from home, but try to challenge yourself to get everything done in just 40 hours, and you will be surprised of how much you can get done in just 40 hours. It forces you to be more creative and more effective with the time that you have at hand. So here you go, one simple strategy for you.
Okay, so that was our video on how to set boundaries and some tips on how to reduce stress. So we're going to go ahead and continue with our presentation. Thank you very much. So here we're going to go over the types of stress. There are two major types of stress. The first one is called life events. This is described as a series of events that can create a stressful impact. So this goes back to us taking those various tasks at work, or trying to take on extra projects. All this will trying to maybe get that promotion or be that straight A student. Another type of stress is chronic stress. This results in role overload, conflicting roles in the individual in order to for the life to produce a competing and potentially conflicting demands over time. We often do not allow ourselves the time to de-escalate from the stress at work, school, or other things because of the many roles we play in our life, such as student, worker, father, or mother. A question would be, well, how do we maintain these boundaries under stress? The important thing to do is to reach out and build a web of resources. And remember, we are not all experts, so it's important to find people who have the expertise. So whether that is joining a therapy group, a support group, enrolling in a class, it doesn't matter, just reach out. Also, focus on choosing responsibilities and limit time during the challenge. If something is causing you to spend more time at school or work, then this is a sign that boundaries need to be made. And above all, a key thing to remember is be compassionate with yourself. None of us are immune to health issues, financial crises, or a family member who has an addiction problem. After all, we are human, and it's okay to have flaws. You are not alone. Next slide, please. Okay, next we're going to take a moment to do an activity. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some time. If you guys could get a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper. So I want you guys to think about your top 3 values. Something you guys enjoy doing from a strenuous task, after work, after school. So this these values can be anything. It can be something maybe like cooking, maybe like going out for a walk, taking your dog out for a walk, spending time with your significant other, whatever those values mean to you. So go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys some time, and I want you guys to go ahead and write down your 3 top values. So I want you guys to think about the 3 values you guys just listed on your paper. How much time do you get to spend doing any of the values you listed? Do you even get to spend any time at all? See, this is important to set boundaries to do some of the things that we value. But before we do this, we must also identify where the boundaries are needed. And remember, self-care is the best care. Next slide, please. Okay, so next, we're going to take a poll. And we want to see if the tools we provided are effective to set boundaries and reduce your stress. So as a statement is stated, I have gained the tools to set boundaries to reduce my stress. So if you go ahead and take a few minutes and think about it and respond. Okay, so the results have came in, and these people have stated they strongly agree or they agree. So I just want to thank you guys for taking the time and accepting some of the tips and information how to set boundaries and reduce stress. Next slide, please.
So as staff and faculty, many students will often come to you with questions and issues about different areas in regards to their education, but sometimes in their personal lives as well. You may feel the need to solve all their problems in order to be helpful. However, this could potentially be a boundary concern as it may increase your workload and your stress. So remember that there are different departments and offices and programs on campus that are able to assist students in a more thorough manner. So we listed on these slides the different departments that you may need to refer students to once you understand their concerns, and we will paste their links to their offices on the chat. And part of our duties as MSW interns at Fresno City College are to listen to students that reached out to us or have been referred to us, and to help them resolve any challenging issues or situations that may be interfering with their ability to complete their academic goals. So if you do need to refer students to us, feel free to do so, and we'll list our contact information in a couple of slides. So again, just remember that on-campus resources are able to help students more whenever they do come to you. Maybe if they need to talk about personal issues or tutoring, just refer them out to all the campus resources. On this slide is further resources on boundaries. So if you're interested in furthering your knowledge on boundaries, if it was interesting for you, we listed a book, a podcast, TED Talks, some websites, just further resources for you. This will also be pasted on the chat. And lastly, our contact information over at the Social Sciences Division. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns about boundaries, if you're interested in referring students to us, you can reach out to any one of us, the coordinators, the interns, or our MSW intern that we have access to as well. And this will be posted on the chat.
So why are boundaries important? Overall, we set boundaries to protect us and make us feel safe. It keeps the good in and the bad out. Boundaries let people know what is and not acceptable behavior. And remember, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable at first and be stressful, but it's temporary and you feel better afterwards. We set boundaries for self-care, self-love, and to ensure honest interactions in all future relationships. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Described as how emotionally close you let people get. Boundaries can be described as how emotionally close you let people get to you. They are also where you draw the line within a relationship. They say how much you are willing to give or take before requiring that things change or deciding to call it quits. For example, you may be okay with your partner going out one night a week without you but feel that 2 or 3 nights per week is unacceptable. Or maybe you are willing to forgive one case of infidelity but feel that any more than that is too much. Boundaries are one of the measures of relationship health. As such, they can contribute to your relationships with your partner, children, family, and friends in positive or negative ways. When do relationship boundaries lead to increased levels of stress? Responsibility imbalances. When you don't set boundaries on what you will say yes and no to, you can easily take on more responsibilities than you are comfortable with just to please others. This is called rejection sensitivity and can add stress as you try to navigate a lifestyle that is too busy for your comfort level. If you don't respect your own limits, others may not respect them either. Not setting boundaries or limitations on your time can also make it harder for others to tell when they've asked you to do too much. Setting healthy boundaries helps you maintain the right balance in your schedule and in your life. It gives you permission to say no and better protect your time. Feelings of resentment. When you continue to say yes to things that would be better addressed with a no, you might start to feel angry or resentful. It may seem as if others are taking advantage of you or that you are being expected to give too much. Sometimes this resentment occurs because you don't realize that you've had a hand in your overly busy schedule. You can't make the connection that you let your to-do list get out of hand. Other times you do realize that you are responsible, so you get mad at yourself for letting it happen. Whatever your perceptions, the end result is that you feel stressed and resent the situation. This can lead you to close yourself off and alienate yourself from the people in your life. It can also potentially damage the relationships you're intending to strengthen by constantly saying yes. Increased conflict. When you feel like the give and take in a relationship is out of balance, this can create conflict. Conflict often leads to stress, which can not only hurt your relationship further, but can also harm your physical health. Every relationship experiences some level of conflict or disagreement. When this conflict is related to not setting or enforcing clear boundaries, you may find that it lingers. It is never fully resolved because it keeps happening again and again. Maintaining healthy boundaries lets others know where they stand with you and can prevent additional conflict in your relationships. It can also decrease the amount of imbalance or resentment that exists, reducing your stress even more. Setting boundaries to promote closeness. A common misperception about personal boundaries is that keeping everyone in your life at arm's length is the same as having strong, healthy boundaries, that you can't let others in if you want to be happy. This isn't exactly true. In fact, allowing others to get close to you, in a healthy way, is the true goal of boundary setting. Proper boundaries allow you to have close relationships that respect the needs of all involved. They enable you to be independent and interdependent at the same time. Most of us have some people in our lives who require a different type of response and, indeed, need to be kept at an arm's length, or further, because they do not respect the boundaries we set. But the majority of people can be allowed to get close to us without stepping on our toes, as long as we let them know where we stand. The bottom line is that setting healthy boundaries in relationships is a key skill for relationship stress management. It is a kindness we can do for ourselves as well as for those we are close to.
And what stress can illustrate when setting boundaries. Now we want to open up to everyone up in the chat. I want you guys to feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A section. or direct comments in your chat. So feel free. And okay, can you talk a little bit more about boundaries and the connections between values and boundaries? Okay, so discussing more about values, it's important to do things aside from strenuous things such as work and school. And so going back to the activity, if you can remember some of the top 3 things that you value in your life, you can draw attention that, am I allowed to spend that time doing the things that I enjoy? And if not, that what am I doing, or what's the imbalance in my life that's creating me to draw more attention for me not to do the things that I value? So this is important for us to identify the boundaries that we need in order for us to recreate that balance in our life. Any more questions? All right. Thank you guys for taking the time. And
Enrique, I'm sorry. We had a question come up in the Q&A. What is an appropriate way to tell friends or family about your boundaries?
so a good way to, I guess, bring about boundaries to friends is just to sit down and have a friendly conversation and let them know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. And even at first doing that, it can be a little overwhelming at first and a little bit uncomfortable. But again, it's temporary. And when you set those boundaries, you feel a lot more better after, because you don't have to decide on whether or not, because these people or because your friends crossed these boundaries, what to do next. So establishing these boundaries beforehand helps eliminate some of these problems. And then also you can find this presentation in the link. I think we have it. We'll be having a link and be sharing it with everybody who is available today at our presentation. And that will be taking you to YouTube and having our own channel where you can find our presentation.
And also, Enrique, I can send your slide deck to the participants of this webinar.
Oh yes, that'll be very helpful. Thank you very much. All right, any last minute questions, statements? Go ahead and give you guys a few more seconds, just think about a few more questions maybe you guys might have. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you for everyone for joining us on our presentation today. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.